Welcome to the Sage Family Podcast,
where we explore natural, homeschooling, gentle parenting,
simple living, and family adventure.
I'm Rachel Rainbolt, the Sage Parenting Coach, coming to you from the Pacific Northwest, where I live wild and free in connection with my 3 wildlings and the Papa Bear in our fixer-upper on the beach. This is episode 33, and today I'm here with my friend Rachelle McCloud talking about anxiety. Rachel is an unschooling mama of 5, mental health therapist, and emotional wellness coach from Salem, Oregon, who specializes in helping people move their anxiety, depression, and trauma disorders into remission, and generally upgrade their inner world. So join us around the campfire and let's get living the family life of our dreams. If you are enjoying the Sage Family Podcast, then please scroll down and click those stars in your podcast app or on iTunes. This is a quick and easy way to support the show using the currency of feedback. T.S. Lorth just posted a review saying, "Serious parenting goals. I cannot stop talking about how inspiring Rachel and this podcast are. I have learned so much from her and her guests and cannot stop sharing it with my partner and friends. She opens your eyes and challenges you to move off the mainstream path of thinking about children, parenting, and living. I love Sage Parenting. T.S. Lorth, Sage Parenting loves you back." The adventure this week was a hack school adventure to the Falls City Wallaby Ranch with 50 of our friends. I think this might have actually been one of the first hack school events I organized up here in the Pacific Northwest years ago, so it was a return visit for us, which adds a whole new layer to the learning experience. Rex, our kangaroo farmer, taught us all about how he cares for the animals, the mechanics of their locomotion, and of course, how those babies develop, which is fascinating. We got to pet and feed the wallabies and kangaroos and see the little babies in the pouches. The kangaroos were so soft and those joeys were so cute. After the hands-on tour, some of us went to a nearby nature trail together, where we hiked to a river at the base of a mountain. We all waded across the shallow water to play on the island created by the low summer water levels, and the view all around was breathtaking. The organized adventures are fantastic, but we always hold the space with our time for spontaneously extended playtime with our friends. This flexibility is a part of our family culture, and these relationships, experiences, and memories are treasured. If you want to see photos and videos of this adventure, then head on over to Sage Parenting on Instagram and follow along. Today, Rachelle McCloud is joining me to share a conversation on anxiety. I first met Rachel at the Life is Good Unschooling Conference 3 years ago, and I always enjoyed all of her talks and discussion groups and conversations with her family, so I wanted to invite her here to share a conversation with you all too. Now tell us your story, Rachel. Who are you? What are you passionate about? What about your relationships in life fulfill you? And what is your relationship with this topic of anxiety?
Yes. So I'm Rachelle McCloud. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I am a mental health therapist and wellness coach. I am passionate about putting anxiety, depression, and trauma disorders in remission. That's what I enjoy doing. I come from quite the family history of anxiety, depression, and trauma. And so I think unconsciously I was building these skills to kind of save my family, and so, but, you really can only save yourself and set a great example and inspire the people around you. But along the way, I picked up some really phenomenal skills, mostly because my anxiety disorder had become so intense that I really found myself in some pretty dark places, and I needed relief. And I don't like pain. I am a kind of, I do not believe in no pain, no gain. I really like gain with no pain. And I don't like coping. And so I really did not, I was not looking for coping strategies throughout my life. I wanted to heal. I wanted to feel better. I wanted this to stop. And so I really found tools that made that happen. And I really started learning how to work with the body's limbic system, how to work with the body's energy system, how to use traditional therapy and therapeutic practices to really rehab the brain with these other really phenomenal interventions. And so once I got a hold of my first one, and this woman gave me the training DVD set for this, and she said, try this, it will change your life. And sure enough, it did. And it was really weird. It was a really weird intervention. It's emotional freedom techniques. And, I started tapping on myself. That's what they want you to do. They want you to tap. So I was like, okay. But I really think that if it hadn't been weird, I don't know if I would have really enjoyed it. I really get a kick out of cutting edge things. And I think the fact that it was bordering the line of mental health and just the woo weird. Yeah. It was just like, yes, okay, I'll try it. And the first thing I tried on was Insomnia. I would go to sleep. I would lay down, and then, I know now that that's when your prefrontal cortex starts, is the most active, is when you are relaxing, but I didn't know that then. And I would lay down, and I had 3 children under 3, and everybody had different sleep cycles. And I would just lay there and be like, I need to go to sleep right now. If I don't go to sleep right now, I'm not going to get any sleep in. I need to sleep right now. And you can't sleep under those conditions.
No.
And so I tried it for that, and I just laid in bed and I just started that whole thing. And so I started tapping the first time through, and I yawned, and I tapped the second time through. I fell right to sleep, and I woke up the next morning having slept, and I was just like, oh my gosh, that is insane. What happened? What was that about? What more can I do with this? And so I started using it on everything. And so really, that was really a huge turning point in my life. And when I really started to come out of some really big, deep, scary places, and just kept building. And here I am building and building. And now I help other people do the same things with their lives. I love that. On another note, I am super into edible landscaping, and I love to do tons of things with my children, and really just support them and love them, and listen to all this Minecraft talk, and,
Right there with you.
do all the dances. And I'm trying to learn how to whip right now. That's, it's a hot mess, but I'm trying.
Oh yeah. Me doing all of the dance trends. It's pretty. It adds an extra layer of entertainment around the house for sure.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about me.
And how many kids do you have now?
I have 5. I have
5
kids now.
And you guys are an unschooling family, and your husband is the full-time parent and a musician, right?
And artist. Yep.
And artist. I love his music, so we're going to include a little clip of his song at the end of this episode.
Awesome.
Okay, so let's talk about presentation. What can anxiety look like in motherhood?
Well, anxiety, first of all, is, really a secondary emotion. And it really it's generated by fear. And so really anything that we're afraid of can manifest itself in anxiety, which for moms can be anything, and it can multiply. And, here we are, we have these beautiful babies, but it's like our heart is walking around outside of our body in these little people, and we can come up into any fears. And sometimes I think also, we get to a place as a single person where we're really pretty functional. And then as we have children, a lot of our childhood issues just start springing right up, and we don't Yeah, right. And we don't really realize it until it's causing anxiety or some other dysfunction in our life. And what that can look like is, we can be afraid of being separated from our kids, of, we can't let them out of our sight, or I used to have really intense, intrusive thoughts postpartum. That postpartum period for me with my second child was really intense. I would have intrusive ideas about throwing her off the balcony, and I mean, pretty violent things, accidentally falling on a knife and stabbing both of us. I mean, I don't want to trigger anybody, but I also want to normalize that, that these intrusive thoughts, our brains are super creative, and there's creative with wonderful things, but they're also creative with really not very wonderful things. And that was a really terrible time for me, because I didn't really know what was going on with that, or why that would happen, or why I would think such a thing. And I think that when moms can experience those types of intrusive thoughts in all kinds, I would imagine things falling down, and, every way that my child could be eliminated from the earth was what my brain was really obsessed with, and so I think that sometimes we can have anxiety from that. We can have just a fear of what other people think of us, fear of being judged, fear of saying the wrong things, fear of, sometimes, we have limbic systems that will really put us into fight, flight, freeze, or faint mode, which is, some of that, what's underlying the symptoms of anxiety is that survival mode, and sometimes that can really force us to behave in ways we don't want, which can really make us anxious too, because now, we know that, we could start, yelling at any time, and okay, and now I need to figure out how I'm not going to yell anymore. And, and now we have, it's split off into two things, two problems. Yeah. That, it's like, instead of having one problem of, okay, how do I resolve this trigger that, where I start yelling, now it's this yelling problem, plus the fear of what other people are going to think, the fear of screwing up our children, the fear of, and it can just multiply and branch off and really become a whole host of challenges. And so I think that.
Yeah. And I think I I agree 100% with all of that. And also, I think a lot of times our children, especially once they start to get a little bit older, can become in therapy speak, we say like the IP, the identified patient, kind of like the scapegoat or the target they can be like the walking, living representation of our anxieties, and we can sort of put responsibility for them onto our children subconsciously. Yeah. Like if we are feeling incredibly anxious and that the form it's taking is like a fear for our child's social well-being, then we can put all sorts of pathology on our kids, challenges around socialization, or our academic concerns, or fears around their safety. I hear a lot of like labeling language on children that pathologizes really natural ways of being, and really that is coming from a parent's anxiety. Like you talked about, like the fear Absolutely. Of being judged by others, or fear, so many different fears that you could speak to, but sometimes it can even be, it sort of like is channeling through us onto our children.
Absolutely. I think that it would be a rare case for that not to happen. Yeah. Yep. We're living our lives by interpreting things based upon our beliefs in our brain, and so, I think that if we're not aware of that piece, we're definitely doing it, and we're being controlled by that in some way. We have no power over that. Mm-hmm. I think that when we become more aware of how is this making me feel, oh, I'm feeling embarrassed. Oh, I'm afraid. Oh, I'm worried about how this is going to turn out, and that helps us be able to, when we can build that awareness in, it can really help us be more present to the moment and take in all the facts and really make decisions based on reality instead of our beliefs about reality.
Yeah, I think a lot of like feeling of failure comes up for parents and with kids, and a lot of like relationship problems come up when we are framing the problem as being within the child, when if you can like radically accept these humans for exactly as they are and reframe this challenge that you're having as an anxiety challenge within you, like then it becomes a really powerful reframe because you can actually work with what the real problem is.
Absolutely. I think that's a great starting place. It's really like, the airlines say, put the mask on yourself first and then help your kid. And I think that if we can deal with our feelings around the whatever issues are coming up, that just makes us so much better able to help our children through these things.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about the science a little bit. I know that you mentioned that darn limbic system taking over. So what's actually happening in our brains and our bodies when we experience anxiety?
Yeah, anxiety, usually with anxiety, there will be a fear that will come up, and all of our emotions have physical, emotional, chemical, energetic, and mental expressions. And so, first you've got your fear, and then from there, your fear is your limbic system cares really only about your survival. That's really its whole job, is to keep you alive. And it gets to receive all the information first before the rest of your brain does. Your thinking center gets the information second. And so your limbic system is interpreting what you're smelling, the temperature in the room, the sounds around you, your thoughts, everything. And it's determining, is this safe or is this not safe? And if it determines that it's safe, all the information goes up to your thinking center, and you get to process all of this information: the sights, smells, tastes, the tactile sensations, the thoughts. You get to do all that in a very logical, reasoning, rational way. But if your body is receiving if your body is communicating information that your limbic system interprets as unsafe, as dangerous, it goes into survival mode. And that's when it will go into fight, flight, freeze, or faint. And you don't get a choice. Your limbic system is not a rational part of your brain. And it's developed like this for a very important purpose, because when we were developing and we were out in the tribes where there were lions, when you find yourself confronted by a lion, you don't need to think about anything. You just need to start running. You need to start fighting. You need to play dead. You need to do something, and your limbic system really takes charge of that and takes responsibility for that. So it will switch you into one of those modes quickly, and you don't get a choice. You don't get to say, okay, I'm going to freeze right now, or I'm going to fight. You don't get that option. If you're in a situation that your limbic system has interpreted as dangerous, you're off. And what happens is that the chemicals will be rerouted away from your thinking center in your brain, and actually under MRI, we can see pictures, and there's really not that much electrical activity in the thinking center, in the thinking part of the brain, but it really is all lit up around the limbic system. And what happens then is your limbic system will reroute all that stuff to where you need it. You need it in your legs. You need it in your arms. You need to be able to brace for impact, or you need to be able to start swinging your fists, or you need to start, verbally fighting, or you need to be able to defend yourself or freeze. And so you need those chemicals right there. And so it will actually take that away from your thinking center. So you aren't really rational. That part of your brain is not functioning like you would be if you were in a regulated state. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times when we get in that place, and the other thing about the limbic system is that it doesn't shut off. It doesn't stop the survival mode until it decides that you're safe. Mm-hmm. And we don't know when that is, and we have lots of tricks to help our bodies do that. We can start watching movies. We can eat a bag of chips. We can go smoke some cigarettes. We can do anything that we can do with our body that helps our body say, okay, well, if we're eating chips, then we're not being chased by lions. Well, maybe it's not dangerous, and it's going through this process. And that we can also give hugs during that time. We can do some really functional things during that time to really help the brain really calm down. But what's problematic is when your limbic system is determining that things are dangerous when they're not.
Yeah, and Dan Siegel calls it the lizard brain. I've read other places the caveman brain. But everything that she just explained there is absolutely true. And we talk about that a lot in coaching too, the coaching I do with clients, that we see it with our children, but it also happens for ourselves, that if the survival center of our brain it gets triggered and decides that we're not safe, then it takes over. And so some people can describe it as like, like right now I can rationally understand that I want to choose this different path. But then when I'm in the moment, it's like knowing it doesn't help.
Yep.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the source of anxiety. Living a counterculture lifestyle and parenting and educating off the mainstream path can bring feelings of isolation, pressure to represent an entire group, having to prove the validity of your choices, sleep deprivation, all of that kind of stuff. If you are, a person of color, if you are LGBTQ, like there's another layer of like that can be a source of anxiety. There's that intergenerational piece that I know you mentioned, like with your own family of origin, where we have these patterns, and it even, intergenerational transmission, it even comes through our DNA, these patterns of anxiety. And for a lot of us who are living counterculturally, we really are pioneers. Like we are changing our family tree, and this is heavy work.
Yes,
so
it is.
Have you seen this particular flavor of anxiety that can come from living a countercultural lifestyle with our children?
Yeah, and I think that I want to step off the path for a second and take it even deeper than this. When I am working with anxiety, I always view it from several. I think there are like 3 ingredients to get you an anxiety disorder, and or excessive amounts of anxiety. The first one is emotional wounds, the second one is habits, and the third one is biology. And I don't specialize in biology, but I have phenomenal experiences with that, and making sure we have enough vitamins and minerals. And I've encountered some wonderful naturopaths who have explained some of this stuff for me. And some of my symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder were put in remission by B6 because my liver doesn't convert enough B6 into the active form. So I absolutely, and especially if there's a generational pattern, I definitely think we should look under that rock, but I specialize in the emotional wounding piece and then habits. And I always start with emotional wounding because a lot of times the habits are in place because we have these wounds.
Right. They were the coping mechanisms.
Yes. And so we have these wounds, and these wounds can be like rejection wounds or isolation wounds, loneliness wounds, safety wounds. There is no, I just worked with somebody with, they are the pain receptacle of their family. Like they take on all the pain, and that is a wound of theirs. And, like these wounds can be so specific, but when these wounds are activated, it's really can be like a broken bone. Like if your leg is broken, and the brain is like that, we can have emotional wounds that are like a break. And so if it's broken, you can't, if you have a broken leg, you can't let anybody touch that.
Yeah.
Because if it's touched, it will cause you excruciating pain. And we're like that with our emotional wounds as well. We build up defenses around them. We make sure no one gets close, and so if we have these emotional wounds, we have to cope with them. We have to live our life with a missing leg. We have to hobble around, and then you take on this great task of unschooling your children and being counterculture and all these things, and you are running into amazing opportunities to touch on your emotional wounds. And when those emotional wounds are touched on, now you're having these limbic system problems, and you're freaking out, and there's things that we should be doing, we should be able to do easily and naturally, but when we're blocked from them, I'm always like, where's the wound? Because we're created to function well. Like wellness is what we're here for, our natural state. And if that's off, it's like we need to hook something back up. We need to repair something. And our brains are phenomenal at healing this. And so we can really, once you can identify it, your brain can fix that thing in minutes, in hours. There's no reason to live a whole lifetime with them.
Right.
So, but I think when we're carrying these wounds, we are reacting to those wounds even more so than I would say living a countercultural lifestyle, and that when when we have issues of identity, when we have some identity wounds where people, maybe we are a person of color or LGBTQ or unschoolers, like in this minority groups, it's easy to feel rejection when it isn't really there, or to not manage rejection well when it does come up, like it can really lay us out, right? I mean, the limbic system goes off and it's like, if you were to touch a break on your leg, I would imagine, I've never actually had a break, but what I would imagine is that there would be excruciating pain and it wouldn't stop for a while. And that's, when we encounter rejection, when we have a rejection wounds, that stings for a long time.
It reverberates.
Yes. And your limbic system is having to plan, how is that never going to happen again? How are we never going to, I mean, it's really very illogical because it's going to happen again, but it doesn't care, because it's not a logic center.
Avoid at all costs.
Avoid at all costs. And so I think that makes it really challenging to navigate these things, and I think when we heal them, we get this whole perspective change, this whole outlook change, where we realize that people are rejecting us because of something about that person, about their belief system. Maybe they're not able to tolerate, differences, or maybe they're afraid because maybe they want to be different too, but they know that they would be rejected by their family, and they have to, cognitive dissonance. They have to, make the outside world look like their belief system, and so there's a lot going on out there.
Parenthood is like has been the ultimate invitation to work through and to heal all of these wounds. Before, when you're going through living your life on your own, it's really easy to just like hop on one leg or to work sitting down or like, you know what I mean? But then once you have a kid, they're like, Mama, run with me. Like they fall down and they're calling out to you and you want to run to get them. Like you want to swim in the river with them. And like it's like from a positive place much of the time, like this positive motivation piece, but you are really like forced through your like drive of being a good parent to do the work of healing all of these wounds so that you can rise to the occasion and be the person that you want to be and be the parent that this child needs to really stop those intergenerational patterns, to be a disruptor of that transmission of anxiety.
Yeah. Absolutely. It is a huge invitation. And I think that, our culture doesn't value emotions the way that we value lots of other things, and so we don't come into adulthood understanding you're going to have to work through some stuff, to be who you want to be, you have to grow.
Yes.
And then, if you know that, then, well, how do you grow? And I think that's, why it's so wonderful that there's so many coaches out there that are springing up, and there's so much transformation happening, in the therapy field that we're getting some real answers. Before you'd go to talk therapy, which, affects the talking part of your brain, the thinking part of the brain, that, does not impact the limbic system. And so, it doesn't impact the limbic system directly. And so you'd be in therapy for years or decades, and your limbic system would remain unchanged because it doesn't care about what you talk about. It doesn't, it doesn't care at all. But there are things that it does care about, and we're all learning how to affect that part of the brain so much faster and so much more directly that, we have strategies. We have strategies you can pick up and use yourself, and so I think that.
Okay, good. Now let's move into the most helpful part here with treatment. How can we prevent or reduce anxiety?
I think there's lots of little tricks. I think first, giving words to thoughts and feelings, as we're talking with our kids, we can say, I can see that you really feel frustrated, that giving words to, they're like, yes, and that's how the processing part of your brain, the thinking center, really will start secreting those calming chemicals to your limbic system and creating change. So that's really powerful work. I mean, Dan Siegel, who I am totally a fangirl about, he talks about that. And And he says that if you can name it, you can tame it. And there's brain reasons around that. And then, so talking about thoughts and feelings, but also like you really getting to the core of the issue,
Yes.
and with anxiety, that's not the core of the issue. That's the secondary problem. The first one is fear. What am I afraid of? And talking about fears. And there's wonderful tricks with journaling and those sorts of things. I personally, I like journaling, but I also want to use a strategy that affects the limbic system directly while I'm journaling. And that would be, I like to use thought-filled therapy. That's my go-to, but I used emotional freedom techniques for years. I'm now getting into some energy medicine. Donna Eden I'm in her training program, and she has some wonderful ideas and handouts that people can grab onto and really start working powerfully with their energy systems. And I think those are some really wonderful ways to stay on top of that. And kids respond beautifully to tapping. I tap with my kids a lot as they need them. And it's been wonderful. Everybody's going to run into some traumatic events, by trauma, I mean, you just more than your system can resolve, and sometimes those are little things, that we would think, oh, that shouldn't have been a and deal, but it was. And we don't need to judge that. We need to recognize the outcome, which was an injury, an emotional wound of some sort. Or sometimes they're really big, like car accidents and, all the other fun events that we can, that happen in life. And so it's wonderful to have one of these strategies on hand to help people regulate their limbic system so that it doesn't keep moving on and it doesn't steamroll. Go ahead.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. And I think a lot of when we feel anxiety, especially when our limbic system takes over, a lot of it, it's like our thoughts and our bodies get all tangled up together. And a lot of these things you're talking about can absolutely help with that. I think too, Emotional Agility. I love that book. And it really breaks down in very simple logical terms, which is a fun way to access a really emotional issue, like when you're feeling calm, to like you were talking about, like therapy, right? Like you go in and your prefrontal cortex has these lovely conversations.
Yes.
Like you said, we need to come at all the angles, but really talks about changing your relationship with those triggering feelings, because for the most part, it's really not when you're coming up in these recurring situations that are triggering you, it's not really the situation that's the problem, or even it's your reaction to them. I think is what I'm getting at. It's your attempt to avoid them. Like you said, to avoid putting weight on that leg. Most of the time, that's what gets you in trouble. So to actually feel that pain of the broken leg and name it, to tame it, to actually say, oh, that's the physical pain right there in my right leg. I can feel it just below the knee. That's from when I fell and I broke my leg right there. Okay, that's what that is. So when you can change your relationship to the pain, because most people are running around trying to avoid it.
Absolutely.
So they feel a pain and then they do all these things, all these circus tricks and tumbling and whatnot to try and avoid the discomfort of that, as opposed to just sitting with it for just a minute and creating a space between that trigger and the reaction.
Absolutely. And I think that with healing the brain, it's very counterintuitive, and you have to look at it instead of running from it. You really have to go to it. But I think that what's wonderful is I look at, I really like these desensitizing interventions, because it's like doing, you got to do your physical rehab on your leg, but let's take some ibuprofen first, And really, these interventions that desensitize, they do that. They bring down the intensity of the distress, so that your prefrontal cortex can look at it without causing a system shutdown or a system rewire, fight, flight, freeze, or faint. We really, the work we want to do is around that system so that we are not triggering fight, flight, freeze, or faint, because it's not fun. And if you're constantly, and I think that's one of the downfalls of talk therapy is that you're going in there, you're hashing up all this stuff. It's excruciatingly painful. And then you have to do this every week. And people don't want to do that because it hurts and actually be traumatizing. And then your limbic system will really, in survival, talk you out of going and create all these excuses and sabotage you. And it will make sure that does not happen, consciously or unconsciously. We're not going back there, you know. And so I think that when we use desensitizing strategies, we really bypass that and we can get a lot of healing a lot faster because we need that limbic system to chill.
Yes. I mean, one of the things that I do a lot with my clients is to use, like, you can use journaling, you can do it through meditation, but to, like, at first, before you are actually trying to respond differently in the moment, just like sit down and imagine yourself in one of those reoccurring triggering situations. Like we're just pretending, so it's not real. And to help you even in that, you can use all of those desensitizing tools and strategies, like you said, the tapping and the, all of those things, like to start in a really safe way so that limbic system is not going to get triggered. Like, let's just imagine that we're, in whatever, you're trying to like think of the sounds and the smells, but you're like safely at home in your living room and, whatever, like just imagining it in a really safe way, in the safest way that you can imagine, just getting a little taste of it. And then using all of those desensitizing tools and strategies and then choosing a different path, like hypothetically, we're just pretending in your mind, and then scaffolding up the intensity of those imaginings, like of that meditation or of the journaling, like walking through it with writing, if that's how you work better. And then you scaffold up to actually putting yourself in really mild situations that would previously have triggered you. And again, you just keep scaffolding up.
Yeah. And what you're talking about there is, in my mind, a rehab program. We need to start using this bone, this muscle, this leg, but we need to start really small. And, in my work, I deal with severely traumatized people. And so some of my clients can do that. And that imaginary work is really a great place to start because you can control it. And even in that, like, I will do, even like I have to have tons of tricks because that can really, even just pulling it up and visualizing it can really let people out, and they just cannot tolerate that and function in their life at the same time. And so I will even add on other tricks, like I will have people put things in containers and like we won't open it, but we will do some mental tricks to get the healing in there indirectly, like where it will create more safety. We'll stand farther away from it. We will, because ultimately, if your brain knows what the target is, you can heal it. Yeah. Even if you're not looking at it, even if you're standing across the world from it, even if, all the, guardian angels, I had one person they put their miniature horse in front of it. Because that horse had enough attitude and sass that whatever came out of that box, they would handle for them, And I was like, yes,
I dig it.
Horse.
I love that.
So, I mean, and those are just some of the things, but I think that, when the more sensitive of people that you're working with, really the more tricks you have to have, because it really does, it all involves the same work, but their brain has to say like, yeah, that is safe. Okay, yeah, I could do that, and so I've noticed in my work, like, I'm inventing these things all the time because you get to know people and you get to know, which angles you can approach this wound with. But ultimately, you're right. We have to look at it. I mean, that's how the brain heals.
Yeah. And like meeting, I often talk about helping your children through hard transitions and it always has to start with meeting them where they're at. Like you can't, maybe you feel like your child should, quote unquote, be in a certain place or be able to do a certain thing. But if they can't, you can't start there. Like you have to meet them where they are at, and then you move through. You meet them where they're at the point where they feel safe and they feel confident and they have what they need to be successful. And then you take like one small step forward together at a time from there. And it's the same with yourself. Like we tend to have a lot more compassion and sensitivity and emotional know-how when it comes to helping our children than we do with with ourselves.
Right. Well, we get messages all the time, don't cry, stop being a baby, don't be a wimp, don't be a complainer, and actually complaining with some of these strategies is the best intervention, because if you're complaining about the problem, you are looking right at it. Throw an intervention on top of that, throw a fit. Absolutely. Throw a fit. Go in a private place where where you're not going to hurt anybody with your expression, and throw an intervention with it. Throw your fit with the intervention. Crying. There is not a more powerful intervention we have than crying, and it's off limits to us, and so I think you're right. And I think that there's a lot of reasons why that's such a challenge for us.
Well, so many of us were not raised on this gentle parenting path. And so a lot of the parents I work with, and I know a lot of parents out there in general, they have their inner child who was never seen or heard. Their feelings were not validated. Like you said, their family was intolerant of any sort of negative emotional expression, which again, because their parents couldn't tolerate it because it was too uncomfortable for them, because their parents didn't hold space for it. So even something as simple as complaining, like in the right context, can really help someone to feel seen and heard and validated, and to identify the emotion that's going on. And then once you actually have it in your hands like that, then you can start changing your relationship to it. Then you can start working with it and molding it.
Yes. And my journal is full of complaints. Yeah. I don't know about yours, but I talk all the trash in there, and my husband knows. I said, I'm not locking this. I'm not moving. Read this at your own risk. Because that's where I put all the stuff you can't say to people, but I need to work through it. And I need to, why do I feel that way? Where is that coming from? And I'm tapping with it. And, as a result, since I added tapping in, my journaling times are a lot shorter. Like I used to go for pages and pages, because, some of that is, we need words for our thoughts and feelings. Yeah. And, if you grow up in a family of trauma, or a family that doesn't talk about feelings, that part of your brain, which is your processor, which is your inner healer, doesn't have words for things. And so, which is called alexithymia. And so you really have to start wiring that. You have to fire that part of the brain repeatedly so that it will wire together, so that you can start talking about words and feelings in real time, And so when I first started journaling, I would just be journaling and writing, and then I would come to a feeling and I don't have a word for it. So I just write down, I felt kind of lame, but I was like, that's what I got, So I just keep writing. And then after a while of coming up against that feeling, I would say, oh, that's frustration, and then I'd have a word for it. And then I could tell people I'm frustrated, and this is why I'm frustrated. It was huge, and these are just little skills. But in my family, we don't talk about things until in my family of origin, until you are so in a limbic state, you can't help but talk about them. And so now discussions are unsafe because everyone's in a fight, flight, freeze, or faint, Right. I'm going to pick fight, you pick fight, this one's going to pick faint, and I'm going to pick, flee, and we've got one running to their bedroom, one, two, you know what I mean? And so, and we just didn't know, we weren't brought up managing that limbic system. So I think that these pieces that you're talking about, journaling, and there's so much good there. There's so much good there. And when you are functioning well and you build yourself up to having a high level of emotional intelligence, you get to transfer that directly onto your children. And that's what's really so powerful about all this work is that the more we build ourselves up, it is like directly transferring it to our children. And I know there's a lot of people that will do anything for their children except work on themselves.
Which is the number one thing you got to do. If you do nothing else, just do that.
It's that counterintuitive piece, that we have to start doing a couple of things backwards so that we can get really transformational results.
So let's talk about those kids. What can anxiety look like in children? It does, because it does not always look the same as it does for adults.
Absolutely. Anxiety for kids can look, I kind of like to call things, okay, so it can look hot. Right? It can be like where they're just like moving everywhere and like they're walking on some, coals, right? It's just hot, very active. It can be cold. They can be frozen and just like shut down. It can be warm and just look absolutely normal. And I have one client like that, and I asked her, she just turned 18, but I asked her to, we were doing an imaginary scenario, walking through this, and she was like, this is really upsetting to me. And I was like, okay, well, on a scale of 0 to 10, how intense is this? She's like, this is a 9. And I'm like, this girl, her coloring hasn't changed. Her body language hasn't changed. And she has been, and when she came in for her assessments, her parents were like, well, how do we know that she's anxious? And after I took this stuff, I didn't know her. I didn't do this exercise with her yet. I said, if she's awake, she's anxious. If her eyes are open, that's how you know. And then when I did this, I was like, no wonder this child has gone for so many years without her anxiety being detected.
Yeah.
She's not giving off any signals. I mean, she was withdrawn quite a bit. She was in her room, different things like that. Brilliant child. I'm doing the work with her right now, and everyone thinks she's quiet. And I'm like, this child's a firecracker. Like, I can't wait to see what happens next. I think that and so so let me come up with some ideas here. Okay, so we have children that are anxious typically will have some things, some flags are difficulty with separation, avoidance, right? So either or, clinging or avoiding, withdrawal, obsessions, compulsive behaviors. They have to check all the doors. They didn't climb the stairs right, so they have to start back over and climb them again. They will talk about stomach aches. They'll talk about the physical problems before they can talk about the other ones. Being argumentative. Being irritable, that's a sign that your limbic system is like on edge all the time. It's not flipping all the way off, but it's simmering right there. And that is a great sign that some anxiety is in place there. Argumentative, fighting for no reason. And sometimes that reason actually is to get off some emotional steam and to regulate. Or to say the words that they need help and they don't have words for needing help, having to have their world just so, creating chaos, I guess those sorts of things.
It's interesting to me because like when we think about anxiety in adulthood, everyone has a pretty clear understanding of what it often looks like. But for children, it can be called so many different things when really what's underlying it is anxiety. Like you said, it could be like being incredibly argumentative or emotionally intense and explosive or shy, there are so many ways that it can present, and it's ways that we wouldn't necessarily off the bat conceptualize as anxiety, but when you really start digging underneath things and when you get to the heart of the matter, it's like, oh, okay, the name for that is anxiety.
Yes. Yes. And I think also I want to include a couple more. Lying can be an indication, difficulty concentrating, their minds going blank, nightmares, angry outbursts, mood swings, flashbacks, talking about an incident that hurt their feelings multiple times. That's definitely a sign that
They're
they're
stewing.
their inner medic is really trying to work on it, but they just don't have enough pieces. So it's circling and circling and circling and circling. And really, that's a really great time to intervene and have some clarifying talks, ask some really powerful questions to kids so that they can start figuring out what those pieces that they're missing are, and then they can. The brain is like, oh, great, good. Thank you for that. I'll put that in there. And then it's like a train track, right? And like there was a track missing and you put it in there and now the brain can keep moving instead of having to circle around, and we don't know what those missing pieces are without these conversations with them.
Yes, sometimes storying is a really powerful way that kids' brains do make sense of a really anxiety-provoking experience. Like when my youngest, he had an experience where he was attacked by a swarm of wasps, and it was terrifying for him. And for the next 3 months, he told the story to every single human being that he came into contact with. And I just trusted it. I get it. Like this is his brain is
that's right.
Getting power over it and giving it meaning and making sense of it and making the world make sense again and feel safe again by the way he was telling it. Like the way he was telling it would evolve and so the brain, like you said, it's so powerful. And when it has a target and it sees what the problem is, it really does try to fix it, tries to repair that broken bone.
Yeah, no, that part of the brain is neurotic and it's really obsessive.
Yes.
and it wants to go to all of our problems. That's only where it goes because it's a fixer. So if we got a problem, it's going right there. And sometimes we can feel like, man, I'm just a negative Nancy. No, your brain wants to go there. So it's so important that we go with our brains and help our brains out, and with the storytelling, I think that's I use that with my kids as well. And I'll ask them, and I like to tap with them on them while they're telling me the story. And then I can be curious and I can listen, and I can also know that I'm helping their brains process. And they love that time to really tell their whole story and then what happened and what was the worst part of that and what was the best part of that, or those sorts of things while helping their limbic system really get through that.
Yeah. So what else can we do? How else can we help our kids with their anxiety?
Oh, I think that, since what I was going to say about this, I think since anxiety is about fears, really helping them figure out what they're afraid of. And I think, since we can't always know, we can't always diagnose our kids with an anxiety challenge or whatnot. But we can say, since they're human, they will be having fears. They will be confronting fears. And one of the best things we can do is just help them learn how to identify and manage their fears. A lot of times fears are sit in the back of our heads and just nag us. We don't even know they're there. If we don't have a practice that we're doing regularly to check in and clear off the fear shelf, then they can just sit there. And for kids, it's the same thing, so asking questions or just talking about fears in your regular life. I talk with my kids about fears. I like to talk about them with my fears after I've resolved them. Because I don't want to put that on them because kids they want to fix us. It's not okay for mom to not be okay. If mom's not okay, I'm not okay. And so I want them to know mom's got this. Mom is a human and mom knows how to fly her own plane. I know how this body works. I'm gonna get this. If I don't, I will get help, I think, just after the fact, talking about the fears, I think asking them, what was the scariest part of that? Or, I like to ask my kids on a daily basis, what was the best part? What was the worst part? And then if their worst part was they'll say, oh, I had to share a sandwich with, Billy, Okay, well, that's a really good worst part of the day, man.
Yep.
Yep.
High and a low.
The high and the low. And I think just ways to, and I think if you're noticing a fear, your kids it's really great to start talking about that. I think there's some really wonderful kids books about mental health disorders. I read one with one of my kids about obsessive compulsive disorder because, it's my disorder. And then, of course, one of my kids has to pop up with it, which no parent likes to see. And so we read a book about it, and it was really wonderful because we got to talk about this other kid who was going through it without having to talk about them specifically or me
Right.
specifically. And so we were getting to learn about obsession and compulsions outside of ourselves. And it built a lot of language, and it built a deeper understanding that gave us a platform to talk on about, So I think it's, like in unschooling, it's like communication. And I think it just, as we bring in this emotional awareness piece, we're able to really just weave it right in.
Yes. I think like managing your own anxiety, like you talked about, is would be number one. A lot of times our children are carrying the anxiety for their parents. Like you said, they want to help their parent. If their parent's not okay, they're not okay. So they will kind of take it on and try and work with it within themselves to try and help you. But of course, they can't do that. Like they're not capable of doing that. So managing your own anxiety is like one of the biggest things that you can do. And you can also share those experience or sort of manage them out loud once you have a handle on them. So, like if we were at a water park just the other day yesterday for my kid's birthday experience. He wanted to go to a water park, and we were like waiting in line for like the biggest slide of them all, and I will sort of say out loud, like, I can feel my heart rate picking up as we get
That's
closer.
right.
Like, is your heart rate picking up too? I'm going to take a deep breath. Do you want to hold my hand? Like, I am safe, like, what's my fear? Like, what if it tips over? Like, well, I could just put my feet forward and I could slide down. I'd be okay. Like just sort of, not like talking about it the entire way, but just touching on it. Like just as we started to get close to the top of the slide and I could see my youngest starting to get a little nervous, like then I will like sort of work through my own feelings out loud sometimes. Psychoeducation, like research shows that psychoeducation is super helpful when it comes to anxiety in a way that it's not necessarily as helpful with other areas of mental health. And this is for kids specifically too, like when kids understand all the things that we've talked about in this conversation, that when something triggers like a fear, your survival part of your brain takes over. And they are they're all about survival, so your brain is screaming to run or to fight or to freeze or to, so that if they have like a basic understanding of within their brains what's happening, that's actually super helpful for them. It gives them this whole other level of power and understanding, because they're not as like they can't necessarily still just control it like that just when you understand how it's working. But it does just change your whole relationship with it, from it not understanding it, from it completely driving to you, actually like being in relationship with it, like, this thing is actually trying to help me, like, and this is how it's trying to help me. I get it. Like I'm sweating right now because my body's getting ready to run or to fight. Like that makes sense to me now. I get what it's trying to do. And so you're trying to work with it from a place not of avoidance or resentment or anger, but of like even gratitude. Like, okay, this is my warrior. Like, this is the thing that's going to keep me safe in times when I really need it. And I just also don't happen to need it right now. Like, okay, so warrior, I'm actually good right now. Like, see, I see this, I see that. So that tells me that I don't need you right now. Like, so like, thank you. You're awesome. Hang tight. Next time, maybe next time it'll be your turn. Like, so just having a better understanding of that can be super helpful for kids. Externalization is really, really helpful with kids and anxiety. Like I just named it the warrior. Also personification. So like if you can externalize it, it sort of makes it's this like nebulous monster in the dark. If you can actually just pull it out of them and like name it and create a character for it. And with little kids, you can do this like just with a piece of paper and a pen. Like what does, if they're talking about their warrior, like what does your warrior look like? What sort of
Yes.
weapons are they carrying? What's their voice sound like? Like, ask them all of these questions to help them externalize it and personify it, because then they get a lot more power and control in their relationship with it, if it's something that they can actually see and understand and work with. And then you can give them some steps and tools to help them have a different relationship with anxiety, or whatever it is that they call it, with fear or with their warrior. Maybe there are these, like you have talked a lot about tapping, like maybe you give them, the different sequence that they move through with the tapping. What depends on like your kid and what their way of being is. Some kids, they really like to talk. Other kids, they're all like physical. They're in their bodies. They're tactile. So just to sort of give them steps and tools that resonate with them, and then to build that practice into their daily or nightly routine. Because if we're only trying to use these steps and tools when like we're in the eye of the shitstorm, like they don't work. We have to really practice them when we feel safe and okay. So that way they become second nature to us. Like one of my kids journals. And one of the things that she journals around is she'll reflect back on one experience from the day and write like what happened, removing as much interpretation as possible. So it's like a challenge for her in the elasticity of her brain, where she'll have an experience and automatically this interpretation gets thrown on it, and then she feels this feeling, and then she reacts accordingly. So to actually have this practice of, okay, so what, like literally what happened? Like the cup fell, as opposed to someone did this thing to someone else. Like just try and remove as much of it. What did I feel? Like what was the feeling? What did the warrior say that meant? Like what did it mean when that happened? And then another possibility is, like, so this one has been huge for her. Like, so that's what the warrior said the meaning was behind that event. But what's another possibility? Just one. Like, just come up with one other possible interpretation or meaning that could have had. And then from there, you can say, like, well, I could have responded in this other way. Or like, oh, I learned this. That's just like an example of like a simple journal prompt that resonates with one of my kids. But you can set something like that up for whatever specific challenge your kid is having, that anxiety is sort of feeding for them.
That is beautiful. I really work with people 15 and up. And so I don't have a lot of those little kid tricks, in my professional bag. And so I am totally taking all of those. That was wonderful. And I think, what ultimately it comes down to is you're talking about really, when you're talking, all of this, the brain works the same way, no matter how old you are, but the different tricks and, what works for different populations really is important. Yeah. And so, but what you're talking about when we're talking about, let's just evaluate this and let's gather some data, that's your inner observer. That's that healing part of your brain, and the other part, when we talk about our feelings or we talk about, or the inner critic and the judgment, that's not the inner healer. That is not going to get you healing. It's probably going to hurt you more. And when we can shift out of that into, okay, what data can I gather about this? Okay, this is important to me. This hurts me. I feel this in my chest. It makes me, feel blah, blah, blah. That is when we're doing that, that's when we're keeping it in the issue in front of the part of our brain that does the healing. So yes. I think that the steps that you outlined there are perfect, especially for the younger crowd.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And I love to personify that, even like that inner critic as the warrior, because then it opens you up to try to like question the possible motivations behind the behavior and see the ways in which the warrior is trying to help you and maybe just doing a poor job of it. Like, and how they're not getting you to where you want to be. Like, why are they criticizing you right now? Like, well, you've experienced in the past feeling like ostracized from a group, and they really want you to get that sense of belonging that you crave. And so they're telling you like, no, do all of these things. You're doing them wrong. You got to do them right so that you can be accepted. So that warrior is confused about what your goal is, because maybe that was your goal when you were 13, but it's not your goal anymore. Like, so let's change that relationship to it. And like teens do really well with the journaling piece. Teens tend to get quick to the assigning meaning on an unconscious level. So something will happen and it means I'm not pretty enough, or it means she hates me. Like, so questioning, like, what else could that mean? And I'm not saying necessarily this is totally for sure what it means, but let's just throw something out there, like, just to practice getting your brain a little bit more elastic in that area of what else could that mean. And as adults, we can do that too, because as moms especially, we have a lot of like fear of perceived judgment. And I would say like 95% of the time that judgment is not even real. It is just perceived. Yeah. But just questioning that, like, what else could that comment they made have been about? Like you mentioned, it's most of the time about them, not about you at all. So what else could that comment have been about? And with little kids, yeah, like when you can externalize and personify this stuff, it is a game changer, because kids live in that like pretend play world. So if your kid is having some sort of challenge with something, and you can like draw it and create a whole story around it, and this creature has like qualities and smells and sounds, and then you can like, how does maybe it's a monster named Fred, like, how does Fred help you? Like, I know Fred really scares you a lot of the time, and Fred sort of tricks you into doing all these things you don't want to do, but Fred's there for a reason. Like, that's right. Fred's you invited him on your team. He is doing something for you. How is he helping you? How does Fred help you? And so then it like really gets them to start, oh, okay. And then, so Fred's trying to help you. Now we know he's trying to help you, but he's not doing a great job. What could he do that would be more helpful? Like, what could Fred do that would actually help you? And then come up with some ways that Fred could help you. Like, maybe he could protect you at night from the other monsters, because he's actually working on your team and you didn't realize that before. So let's tape this picture on your front door. Like, and the kids will come up with amazing ideas. So to really just ask a lot of open-ended questions and in ways that flesh out through the like imaginative world, all of these issues that are hard, that they're struggling with.
Yeah, and I think you touched on an interesting point there, is that a lot of times we are having the anxiety is we're using it to help us, you know, and a lot of times people will, I think it's kind of funny because I've had an experience with this, but you know, as my clients are starting to resolve their anxiety, all of a sudden they'll get to a place and it'll just be a fear, like, well, what am I going to do now without this? I don't know. You know, how am I going to, you know, I don't know if I'll have any motivation, you know, and it's like all this stuff will start coming out about how we're using this, you know. And when I was first diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, I left so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. This is wonderful. I wish I would have had this diagnosis 15 years earlier. And I was driving home. I got on the ramp onto I-5, and all of a sudden I started panicking. I was like, how will I keep my kids alive? I have to rehearse every single thing, every single day, you know, I need to do this. And it was like, okay, hold up, deep breath. People keep their kids alive while being sane, you know. I think we can learn this.
Yes, because these things that we have developed, that our brains have developed to try to help us, even though they are often misguided, they are a part of our team. Like, they become like a team member inside of us. They're like a friend, and some relationships are abusive. Like,
and we need to change those, right? We need to put some healthy boundaries in there.
Yes, but they are still relationships. Like, we have relationships with these different parts of ourselves that serve us in different ways or don't serve us in other ways. So I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, so the approach, I just need to cut this out of me. Like, this just needs to be not there. But it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't, because anxiety is a healthy emotion.
Exactly.
But it can become a disorder when it's blocking you out and taking away your ability to function.
Yep.
You know? And so it's something that we will always have, and we don't have to, but it's really wonderful when we can get in a right relationship with it.
Yes.
And I want to comment on the inner critic piece. You know, that's a big part of the work that I do with in my work. And what I notice with the inner critic is I believe that sometimes these are also a symptom, like flashbacks. I think that we've stored words people have said to us and they just come back out,
Oh, yeah, that's not a think, that's a for sure. That's
right?
that's I mean, most of us as moms, we hear our mother's voices. Let's be real here.
Yeah. And I say think because I form these, in these constructs, right? As I'm exploring people's brains and, you know, I don't think, you treat flashbacks a little differently than you treat fears,
Yep.
well, not very much, but having that word of saying, okay, hold up, and when you have a flashback, you want to treat that at the origin, that's the
Yes.
fastest way to clear that out. And so when you can label this inner critic or these words as, okay, hold up, where's this coming from? It's flashing me
Yes.
back over here, but why? And really deconstructing it from there.
That is so powerful and so, so, so true.
And I really think that we have more, like adults, and have more flashbacks than we give words to,
Agree.
than we really acknowledge. And sometimes, people will come to me, well, how is resolving this going to help me with my life? And it's really hard to explain. It's like if you have emotional wounds, it's almost like there's an open door in your world with a rubber band sitting in the middle of it, stretched from one side to the other, and you try to walk through the door and all of a sudden you just get thrown back out. And you just can't get in there, and then you deal with the emotional wound, and all of a sudden you just easy breezy walk right through.
Yes.
And it's really kind of magical, which is, I'm super into that. I like that.
I love that. Yes, it absolutely is. A lot of times our present dysfunction is really an invitation to step back into the past and heal something that didn't play out the way it needed to, and then you can move on back through.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people feel like, well, it's so much, I will never get through it. And I hear that a lot. And I think that the fact of the matter is you only have to resolve what's in front of you now. If you can't take yourself to the park with your kids because you're anxious, you just need to solve that one problem.
Yes.
And then that one clears up. And now you can get halfway there. Okay, well, what do we got to do to solve that problem? And then, we can find the origins of these things so they clear us up so our function improves. And then the next thing you know, you look back and you've resolved 10 things, 10 core issues. And that has a multiplying effect on your whole life. I mean, I personally, when 10 years ago, when I was just at my ultimate low, I made a list of all my dysfunctional beliefs, and I came out with 166 dysfunctional beliefs. And I was like, but I was like, no wonder my life looks like this. This is what I'm building my life with. And they were 166 opportunities to upgrade myself.
That is beautiful. I picture it kind of like Jenga. It's like you've built up over your childhood and your early adult years, like this life and this conception of who you are. And then like just one bite at a time, just one block, like this one's not serving me. You pull that one block, that one's not serving me. And I do really find that with like the inertia that creates, you do start to hit points where whole sections will tumble down because this thing was all these other things were built on this one faulty belief. And when you pull that out, it's like, oh, so all those other things are like resolved then because that was all bullshit and I can let all that go at once.
Absolutely.
And then you get to like build yourself back up anew.
That's right. And it happens quick because your prefrontal cortex, most of our prefrontal cortexes are freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And so that stuff, like I rarely have to give any of my clients any advice because all of a sudden these emotional blocks are cleared and all of a sudden they're off and running. They're solving their problems. They're making these statements. I just sit back and cheer at that point. I'm like, wow, that was powerful. Wow. And so I think, for me, I tend to be obsessive, right? And so I went in and found 166 things, but the result of that was that was really overwhelming.
Yeah.
Once I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh. And but you're right. It was just one at a time. I remember looking back a month later because I had made, the new beliefs, and those new beliefs look like aliens, alien land. Like I could not connect with them whatsoever. A month later, they seemed like, oh, okay, yeah, that seems a little bit more reasonable. A year later, I looked at that same list. I happened to find it and pull it out, and it was like the dysfunctional stuff that I had believed growing up, like no questions asked, looked like crazy town. And it was like, that is terrible. Who would do that? I couldn't even remember doing that, and all the new beliefs, it was like, yeah, of course, So it's like our brains heal so quickly, and we integrate our healthy, adaptive ideas and thoughts and behaviors so quick when these things are out of the way.
Yes. I mean, on this podcast, we talk a lot about unschooling, and we've talked about like the web of learning, how it's a web, how things are all connected to each other. And when you bring in like one new piece, like it connects to all of these other things. Yes. And it really is the same with debunking like unhealthy or faulty beliefs too. Like when you pull one out, it's like all of these things that were connected to it can just die off. So you might look at a list of 166 things and be like, shit, I don't have 166 years.
Yes.
It doesn't take 166 years
Yes.
to get rid of 166 faulty beliefs.
That's right. And, and I think that, let's just hold space for there are some severely traumatized humans in the world. And I know that there will be somebody who listens to this podcast that has an extreme amount of childhood trauma, and I think, even in those situations, I have a handful of clients right now that have, I take a trauma history because I want to know, I want to be able to navigate as safely as possible without setting anything off. And I can tell you that to tell you their trauma would be to tell you the boxes they did not check, the 3 boxes they didn't check. And I think even in those situations, it's like you go from, it's a longer haul, but every time they resolve something, it's better, it's better, and it's better. And, and pretty soon they're confronting huge issues they never thought they would be able to confront, huge, deep wounds of loneliness or rejection. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. And it's, I think I have one client who is at 1.5 years now with me, and night and day difference, panic attacks multiple times per day, just self-sabotage, all these things. And then, and choosing terrible relationships. And now it's like they're functioning. They don't have the panic attacks anymore. They're able to go to work regularly. They're able to choose healthy relationships, and it's really just a beautiful thing. And I just really believe no one should suffer.
That is beautiful. And I think that brings us to like the perfect like final point to the main part of this conversation, which is like get help.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like you don't have to do all of this on your own. And if you're listening to all this and you're like, that sounds great, but like I can't bridge the gap between like where I am and where I want to be, get help. And same for your children. Like if you move through all of these things and you're feeling like they need more, get help.
That's right.
Okay, let's move into our Q&A. So I posted in the Sage Parenting Tribe on Facebook and on our Patreon community that we were going to chat about anxiety today, and asked if anyone had any questions about it. Megan asks, why is anxiety so tied to anger, and can we unhook those? And I'm hoping that after listening to all of the really fun swirly places that this conversation took us, that people will be able to like extrapolate. But can you speak specifically to that for Megan and everyone else out there? Why does it tend to be so tied to anger?
Funny, because that's my anxiety and anger are tied together. And I think, anger is also a secondary emotion. And I find that anger is, it's kind of like you need some things involved for anger to take place. And one of those is you need hurt, or you can have some fear, which fear and anxiety are, anxiety and anger both can be triggered by fear. And, but I think also, kind of just depends on your personality. Like if you're a strong warrior type, which I absolutely am, you want to take your club to everything, That's how we fix things, but I think just having that compassion and knowing yourself. And for me, what I do is I really try to stay ahead of my limbic system, because if I go into a limbic state, I am not going to behave in a way that I value.
Yes.
Period. Which means that I have to know my triggers. That means that I have to have strategies. And every once in a while, something will come at me that I don't have strategies for and that I did not see coming. And so, and that's when I just have to really apologize. I have to repair, and then I have to review and build in the strategies where I didn't have them before.
Yes. I mean, the anger is the fight piece of that fight, flight,
Absolutely.
freeze. Like when your warrior is triggered and takes over, anger, for those warriors, for those real fighters out there, myself included, anger can take over. And I have found that what has been really helpful in my own journey with this is really wedging in a space, a pause between trigger and response. Like that has been really huge for me. And what that is me, like it starts like the thickness of a piece of paper, because like something would trigger me and then I'd just freak out and yell. And so like it started with like the width of a piece of paper, but from there you can wedge it open and create a bigger pause and a bigger space. And now this is like one of my greatest strengths as a parent, I feel like, and as a human, is that when something triggers me, I'm not so averse to it. Like I can sit with it. And what I'm doing is I'm sitting with it before I have trained my brain to take a pause before that prefrontal cortex kicks in.
Right on. And I think also, I think anger is a really healthy emotion.
For sure.
And I think also it's just energy. It has to move. It has to move. And I will tell you that when I see a mama who gets angry in my sessions, I'm relieved, because that lets me know that she has something, she believes that something inside of her is valuable enough to protect.
Yes.
And that is huge, because I also work with moms that have so much trauma that their inner warrior or their mama bear has kind of been broken.
Yes.
Their mama bear is broken, and they can't bring themselves to that level of value or that level of indignation to, react and protect their children, or react and protect, themselves or their family, or, and so they find themselves, not able to stand up for their kids, or, their mom is saying terrible things to them, or they're in front of their kids, or in front of their, or their, and we can't do those things, and we're not able to stand up for ourselves. And so I think that, and that is, to me, indicates emotional wounding. And with healing that, I've seen that ability to protect themselves and their inner protector really being able to stand up and do the work. But I think that, so I really value the anger. And so I think that helps me not judge it, or not harm myself with it, but also to channel my anger well, and if I'm angry, that's okay, but now if there's a place that I will go where my limbic system will turn on, and those are different for me as well. And so, but it's time when my anger starts tapping me on the shoulder and talking about, hey, let's talk, because I don't like this. And, then it's really time for me to listen. Okay, it's usually a boundary violation, right? And so, okay, what happened? Who did it? What are we going to do? What's the solution? And so it's really like, I really want my anger to know I'm going to listen to you, so that way they can go back to work. They don't have to sit in my ear trying to get my attention, driving me nuts. And then I'm going to flip into a limbic system and blow chunks of anger everywhere,
Yes. And it's like we talked about earlier, like this is one of the parts of yourself, and like, how is it serving you, and how can you be grateful for it, and how can you change your relationship with it? Because anger can be super important part of who you are, and it can fuel, like you said, it's an energy. Like anger is part of what fuels my LGBTQ advocacy, like having a trans kid. Like anger is a part of that energy, like for sure.
Yeah.
Like anger can absolutely serve you, and it's a part of who you are. And we're not trying to just say anger is bad. Like it's like you said, it's that judging piece. Like anger is bad. And then of course that judgment like brings on the shame.
Yes.
Shame is a massive part of anxiety. And it's really
And depression.
Yes.
Shame's really difficult for humans to navigate. Without resolving, shame is one of those time does not heal. You can go to the grave with shame. Yeah. People do every day. And I just do not think that that's how we should be doing it.
No, agree 100%. Let's move into our deep dive. The show notes can be found at sageparenting.com/podcast33, where you can also subscribe and get future show notes sent right to your inbox. So, Rachel, what are your favorite resources for people to dive deeper with this topic?
Well, one of my favorite ones is I have a program helping people upgrade their inner worlds. And in that program, I help them heal emotional wounds and really start to navigate their inner world better and be able to heal things, start getting the brain to really work well, and to generate lots of emotional wellness. And so that's one of my favorite resources. And what I do there is I offer people a free call with me. It's a breakthrough call. And during that call, we will get clear on what's going on, where you want to go, and how to get you there. And if that's my program, we will absolutely talk about that. And if it's not, that's okay too. I will still help you outline your next steps so that you can get the outcomes that you want. And you can schedule your call with me by going to rachelmccloud.com/call, and that's RACHELLEMCCLOUD /call. And that will take you to my scheduler, and you can book a time that works for you, and I will call you and we will talk. So that's one of my favorite resources. I love doing that work with people. And then also, I really love emotional freedom techniques. I think it is one of the most amazing, emotional first aid kits, but it also can really do pretty deep, emergency room work stuff too, emotionally. And so I think that is phenomenal, and that can be found anywhere and everywhere. There's lots of YouTubers doing that, and you can just try it out, see how it works for you, and enjoy that. So those are my two go-tos. And, sometimes I really feel annoying when I keep saying tapping over and over again, but really, that's the real deal. That's what I really believe. Throw some taps on it,
That's a bumper sticker.
Yeah, it's just like my big fat Greek wedding, he puts the Windex on everything. Yes, that's me.
That's adorable. Well, we are going to link to your website, and I'm going to ask you for a link to your favorite EFT. It could be a YouTube video or anything like that, so that people can click right there and get hooked into it. I also mentioned the Whole Brain Child book by Dan Siegel, which really helps parents understand what's happening in their kids' brains. And then the book Emotional Agility, which is just absolutely fabulous for parents doing the work for themselves. Not a book about parenting at all. It's just about doing the self-work. HeySigmund.com is another really great resource for anxiety in kids. They have some fantastic articles over there, so I'm going to link to that for you if you want to read up some more. And then the Sage Parenting book. A lot of the stuff I talked about here in this episode about externalizing and using the senses and creating characters and just sort of helping kids digest and process their emotions, I dive deeper with in the Sage Parenting book. So if you want to read more about that, I will link to the Sage Parenting book as well. Thank you, Rachel, so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing a conversation with us about anxiety. I really appreciate you giving of your time. And this was a super enjoyable conversation. For the record, people out there, this is exactly what it would have sounded like if Rachel and I were hey, let's get some tea and chat about this super important work that we're both passionate about.
Yes, it is.
If you don't got room for yourself, believe you, me, you ain't got room for no one else, no one else, no. If you ain't got room for yourself, you can't have no room for no one else. No longer a victim of my past, it's all behind me. On a journey at last, a sudden search to find me, taking off the mask. I can see so clear, no hood dream no more as I face my fears. Looking back and it's all so clear. The man in the mirror so amazing, spirit is still blazing. My yesteryears didn't hold me down, and whoever God is, he can hold me now. Because now I love myself. I ain't never looking to find life again through someone else. People tell me what is life, I don't know. For me, I live it the same with the spirit of my soul, and dance with the angels on the stage and go. Continue to make love till it ain't no more. I tell my old girl I'll be back when I can. Look, you will understand. Now I know that if I love myself, I can love you. And if you love yourself, you can love me too. 'Cause when we love ourselves, there's enough to go around, and we'll continue to fall in love in this town. From the mountains to the breeze, all the little birds in the trees, to the locals that like to burn one down, to the stars up in the sky, to that sparkle in your eyes. Oh man, I think I love this town. I'm good enough, fuck what you talking about, bitch. I'm hood enough. Damn if I die for the ghetto and waste my whole life trying to prove my love to a mindset that'll take my ass out with slugs. I loved it, but it faked me all out. Selling lies to the youth, my closest ties, doing 10 years strong. This thug shit, not singing I was strong alone, because I beat the block and found a way on my own. Hallelujah, glory to who? None other than the light of the world. But I was starting my bedroom, tending the flame. That's the reason I came, sent from heaven to do what was meant for me, man. I'm ready, I am change. I had enough of this depression shit. Being depressed is a bitch when all fails and you can't find no help. Forgive the world completely and love yourself. Now I know that if I love myself, I can love you. And if you love yourself, you can love me too. 'Cause when we love ourselves, there's enough to go around, and we'll continue to fall in love in this town. From the mountains to the breeze, all the little birds in the trees, to the locals that like to burn one down, to the stars up in the sky, to that sparkle in your eyes. Oh man, I think I love this